Welcome to lesson 7, determining an equation from a line from a point and slope. Just before the video gets rolling, I made a mistake and I start referring to this video as lesson 9, but it is actually lesson 7. So when it starts playing, you notice it's a 9. That's incorrect. This is lesson 7. So let's get rolling. Welcome to lesson 9, determining an equation of a line from point and slope. So let's look at our first example here right away. We want to determine the equation of a line, and they're giving us two things. They're giving us the slope of -2, and it's passing through this point for -1. All right, so what does that mean to find the equation of a line? Well, let's remember our equation of a line in what's called slope y-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. And there are two things we need to find. First, we need to find the slope, and we need to find b, which is the y-intercept. Okay, so don't forget that. So let me just label this here to remind you. That's our slope is m, and b is our y-intercept. And that occurs on the graph when x is 0. What's the y-coordinate? That's b. All right, so the good news is they actually gave us some of this information already, right? They gave us the slope here. They tell us slope is -2. So we already have that done. Now what we need to do is figure out what is b. That is our goal. So to do this on a graph, let's take the point they gave us. Now they gave us 4, -1. That is not the y-intercept. Why? Let's go look at where that is on the graph. 4 over 1 down. There is the point 4, -1. Okay, now that's not our y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept occurs somewhere on the y-axis, like these points I'm just kind of randomly drawing here, okay? So our y-intercept occurs on the y-axis. All right, so to find that, let's use the slope here. So remember, slope is like a set of directions. So let me just write this down here. Remember, slope, well, we got -2 for our slope, right? Which means it's the same as saying -2 over 1. So rise is -2, so we're going to go down 2, and the run is +1. So we're going to head to the right 1. So remember, we have a negative slope, so our line should be going down from left to right, like this, okay? All right, so let's use slope to find more points. Remember how we would do that like a set of stairs, right? So I'm going to go down 2 over 1. There's another point. Down 2 over 1. There's another point. Down 2 over 1, and so on and so forth. I can keep graphing this, right? All right, so there's our slope. Going from left to right, it's going down 2 over to the right 1. Now we can also go reverse, like we're going backwards up the stairs. So if we reverse everything, right? Backwards 1 up 2, backwards 1 up 2, backwards 1 up 2. I can keep doing that. Backwards 1 up 2, there's another point. Backwards 1 up 2, there's another point on my line. So we've talked about this many times before. And look, there's my y-intercept right there. So I'm going to get rid of all these little steps I drew. And because really when you do this, you don't want to draw those on your work. You just kind of, trace it out above. All right, there we go. Okay, so there's some points. Okay, so let's draw a line through those points. So there's, again, that's a quick review again of how to quickly graph a line. Now I'm just going to have to move this down a little bit. There we go. Okay, so we have our slope, and now we found our y-intercept. So our y-intercept is this point right here. When x is 0, y is 7. So that means b equals 7. All right, so we have everything we need to write our equation. Let's write it here. It's going to be y equals -2x plus 7. Done. That's the equation. All right, so that's how we can find it given slope and a point from a graph. But the problem is it's tedious to draw a big graph every time to do all this work. There's a shortcut and an algebraic way. So a lot of stuff we do in math, we can do it algebraically, which is just working with the numbers and equations, and graphically, which is drawing the picture. So there's how we do it graphically. Let's look at the same one really quick, how we do it algebraically. So I'm just going to pause and erase here and show you how to do it. Okay, so here we go again. We're going to get the same answer we got before, but I'm going to show you how you could do this without a graph. So we start the same way. Y equals mx plus b. M and b. Now, we know what m is. We already have it in our question. The slope is -2. So what we're going to do is let's sub in what we already know. We know -2 is the slope, so I'm going to substitute that in. -2 for m times x plus b. Now our job is to solve for b. What is b? Now here's the trick, and it's pretty simple. It's the same thing all the time. We're going to use this a lot, and it's very common in all kinds of different questions. When we're solving for something we don't know, when it comes to graphs and equations, we substitute in a piece of information that we know belongs to that graph. So 4, -1 is a point on that line, right? Look at our graph here. We're 100% sure it is. There it is. So what we do is we're going to substitute that point into the equation. All right, so what do I mean by that? So let me write here. Substitute 4, -1 into the equation, okay? All right, so x would be 4, the y coordinate would be -1. So we got to make sure we get things in the right place, right? Because it's an ordered pair. The x coordinate's always first, the y coordinate's always second. So I'm going to replace in this equation, the one right here, I'm going to replace y with -1, okay? We still have our slope there of -2. We're going to replace x with 4. There we go, 4. And we still don't know what b is, plus b. But notice once we've subbed in the slope and we subbed in the point, there's only one term left to solve for, the variable b. That's it. So all we do is we just use our basic algebra and arithmetic skills and solve for b. So what would we do here? Well, first thing we can obviously do is multiply these two numbers together. So I have -1 equals -2 times 4 is -8 plus b. Now to isolate b, we're going to add 8 to both sides, which gets rid of 8 on this side, and we add 8 to the other side. And I get 7 equals b. Now I can flip that around and make it b equals 7. There we go. So there's the b for our equation. Put it right up here. b is 7. Okay, so you got m and b. So now you can write the equation. So I'll just kind of squish that in right here. Y equals mx plus b. Well, we're going to replace the m with -2, which we already knew, and replace the b with 7. And there's my equation. Same equation we got from the graph, but much, much quicker. Now, in your final equation, you don't put this point in here. So this point that we substituted in, that's a temporary step. We're basically using this point right here, that 4, -1. We're just using it to figure out what is b. Once we know what b is, and we got b is 7, we're done with this point. We don't need it anymore. So we just get rid of it. We're done with it. All we need to put in our final answer are these two variable values. So m, our slope, -2, and our y-intercept, 7. Okay, so I'm going to walk through a couple more here, and especially at the end, there's a couple special case ones you want to pay attention to, and there's some shortcuts, so hopefully you check the whole video out. Okay, on this next page here, we're just talking about the instructions I just went through. So this is on your handout to read through and on your notes. I've got it written out here step by step, what I just walked you through, really detailed how do you do it. So for example, slope's -2, passing through this point 3, 7. Well, what are we going to do? Step 1, like I said, replace the m and y equals mx plus b with the slope. So the m is -2, that's my slope. I put in the equation. All right, step 2, replace the x and y equals mx plus b with the coordinates of the point you were given. So in this question, we were given 3, 7. So we make x3, y7. So I replace the y with 7. I replace the x with 3. All right, now once you've done that, the only thing left to solve for is b. Everything else is now a number. So now that the only variable left to solve for is b, you do this by isolating b. So let's see what I did here, right? I took that. First thing I did is I multiplied the -2 and the 3 to get -6. Then I added the 6 to the other side. 6 plus 7 is 13. There's my b. And finally, now that you have m and b, write the equation. Replace the m in the equation. Replace the b in the equation. There's your equation. All right, so that's in your note. Let's move on to a couple important examples. Okay, example 1. I'm going to try and move through these quick because I know you can just pause and check stuff out. So I know I drone on a little bit in some of these videos, so I'll try and be as quick as I can. Determine the equation of a line with a slope of -3, and it passes through this point. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start the same way every time. Y equals mx plus b. That's my equation, right? All right, so we are going to replace the m with -3 because that's our slope, -3x plus b. I'm going to keep a little running list here of the stuff I got, right? What's m equal? What's b equal to? Here's my little chart I'm going to make. This is a good way to show your teacher you know what's going on, right? So we know m is -3. This is, teachers kind of look for this thing and they, right off the bat, cool, I can see what the kid's doing here. All right, now let's solve for b. So we're going to take this equation here and we're going to replace x and y with the point we're given. So they gave us the point negative 53, 18. So x is negative 3, y is 18. So what we're going to do, let's write that we're going to sub that in. Tell the teacher, tell who you're doing this, what you're doing. We're going to substitute in negative 53, 18. So let's make the y 18. Let's make the x, let's make, we got m is negative 3. Let's make the x negative 53. There we go. Plus b. Okay, next step. Let's just solve for b. So we're going to okay, so let's multiply the negative 3 and the 53 together. Oops. And that's going to give us 159 plus b. And final thing is we're going to subtract 159 from both sides. So you minus it from this side, it's gone. You have to minus it from the other side to keep it balanced. And let's go, what's 18 minus 159, which is negative 141. Now, you can hopefully notice right off the bat, so let me just write that, that's our b. The advantage here is our y-intercept would be negative 141. This would have to, we'd need a big graph to graph this on, right? So graphing is great to get a visual depiction. It's very useful for many things, but it's not always the greatest when the numbers get messier and bigger and uglier. So we want to do this algebraically instead of relying on a picture. All right, so we got m and b. Final step, let's write our equation. So let me just start again with y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we're going to replace the m with negative 3. We're going to replace the b with negative 141. So we're adding negative 141, right? So really, we should just have y equals negative 3x minus 141. All right, there's our final equation that we're looking for. So if you basically show these steps in your homework, you are going to get perfect. Your teacher's going to love you, no matter what teacher it is. It doesn't have to just be me. This is, let's check how I'm being super clear about everything, right? I subbed in my slope. I stated which point I'm subbing in. I showed my work. I've stated this kind of stuff here. It looks great. Let's do another example. Okay, example 2. They tell us the slope is 2/5. So the slope's a fraction in this case, and it's passing through the point 10, negative 7. So I want to do some with fractions here. All right, so let's start with y equals mx plus b. Let's sub in the slope, right? Sub in m is equal to 2/5. So we have y equals 2/5 x plus b. All right, so we know the m. I'm just going to get my little tally going down here. All right, which is 2/5. B, though, we have no idea what it is. All right, so our job is to solve. So what we're going to do, let's take this equation and let's substitute in the point we were given. So they gave us 10, negative 7. So that means we're going to make x 10 and the y coordinate negative 7. So let's do that. Let's substitute in, sub for short, sub in 10, negative 7. Okay, so the y coordinate's negative 7. 2/5 times x is 10 plus b. So I'm just taking this equation here, right? And I'm just replacing the y with negative 7 and the x with 10. All right, so in this case, we're saying, well, what's 2/5 times 10? So you have two choices, right? Let's just go over here and do a little rough work. 2/5 times 10. You could go, don't forget, this is like 10 over 1, right? So 2 times 10 is 20. 5 times 1 is 5. 20 divided by 5 is 4. Or the quick way that a lot of us are going to do is we're just going to reduce, right? 10 and 5 are going to reduce it. That gives me 1 and 2. 5 goes in itself once, goes into 10 twice. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have negative 7 equals 4 plus b. So in this case, the fraction just canceled out. Got 4 either way. It doesn't matter to me which way you do it. This is just the quicker way that I did over here, right, when I'm just reducing. All right, so now to get the 4 off of this side, we're going to have to subtract 4, right? But to keep it balanced, you have to subtract 4 from both sides. So there we go. So negative 11 equals b. All right, so I got my m, I got my b. I can write my equation now. Just get rid of this junk. All right, so we're going to replace in y equals mx plus b. Well, m is 2/5 and plus negative 11, so we can just write minus 11. And there you go. There's your equation. All right, so that one wasn't too hard. Let's do another one. I think the next one involves a fraction, or the one after that. I got a few more examples. They kind of get not more difficult, but just little things you got to watch out for. So I'm kind of stepping them up one step at a time here. Okay, so this one has a shortcut in it, but I'll talk about the shortcut at the end and show you how you could just skip all the work and just do this with no work whatsoever and show no steps. But let's just kind of walk through and show why you can use the shortcut. So same business as usual. We're going to substitute the slope. Well, they tell us the slope here is negative 4 over 7 into the equation. Then we're going to substitute the point that they gave us into the equation. Don't forget, x coordinate, y coordinate. And this is your m, right, is the slope. All right, so y equals mx plus b. Let's sub in our slope. Y equals negative 4 over 7 and then x plus b. All right, so the m we already know, the b we don't know, but the trick to this one is we actually do already know what b is, and I'll show you in a second. Maybe you've already figured it out or you've read the shortcut instructions there. All right, so there's my slope, right? -4/7. All right, so step 2, you take your equation and you sub in this point. So we're going to substitute in 0, 5 for x and y. So 5 is the y coordinate, -4/7 times the x coordinate plus b. Now again, this only works when you substitute a point that belongs to the line. So they're telling us this point belongs to the line. You can't just sub in any random point. All right, back to the question. Now, what is -4/7 times 0? We don't need to get in common denominators or reduce or anything. 0 times anything is 0. So it's just 0 plus b. So in other words, 0 plus b is just b. So b equals 5. So there we go. Let's put that right there. Okay, so to write our final answer in y equals mx plus b form. All right. Well, we have y equals -4/7 x plus 5. There you go. Now, you don't need the shortcut to solve this. It still works, but I'm going to show you the shortcut. You can basically skip all of this stuff, right? Because look, we already know our slope. Check, right? That's already known. Well, anytime you're given a point where the x coordinate is 0, only if the x coordinate is 0, right? If x equals 0, that is the coordinate of our y-intercept, right? That's the definition of a y-intercept. The y-intercept is always when x is 0. The other number is b. So in the shortcut I wrote out here, right? If the point you're given has an x coordinate of 0, and it only works if one of the coordinates is the x coordinate 0, not the y coordinate, the x, then you already have the y-intercept with doing any work. So in other words, I knew that b was going to be 5 automatically. Now again, it happens more than you think. It's pretty common because the y-intercept's a pretty important point. So often you are given the y-intercept in questions. And this applies to all kinds of stuff, not just straight lines that we're working on in grade 9. It applies in grade 10 when we get into quadratics and different equations. So the y-intercept of any equation we graph is always has the x coordinate of 0. So there you go. So if you want to skip all that work, I'll still reward you with full marks if you just jump to the final answer on one like this, because you know that that's the y-intercept. There isn't really much else to say about that, okay? So watch out for that shortcut. All right, let's move on to another one. Okay, we're back to another one where the slope is again a fraction. So in this case, we want to find the equation line as a fraction of -3/5, and it passes through this point. So let's just go through our steps again. And let's start by substituting in that slope, which is -3/5 is the m. All right, so m we know. B, not sure about yet. They did not give me a point like the last one. Notice how the x coordinate here is not 0, so there's no shortcut for me here. So we're just going to have to sub it in like usual and find the y-intercept. Okay, so let's take this equation here and let's sub in the point we were given. Sub in 1, -4. And again, x coordinate is 1, y coordinate is 4, so you're going to replace the x here with 1. You're going to replace the y over there with -4. So let's do that. So I have -4 equals -3/5 times 1 plus b. All right, so now obviously nothing reduces here. I can't reduce this fraction. So I'm just going to multiply the numerators, multiply the denominators, right? So -3 times 1, 5 times the invisible 1 there on the bottom. So it's just -4 equals -3/5. Now again, if this had been something like a 2, then I'd go 2 times -3 and made it 6, right? But it's just a 1. Okay, so now everyone panics and they go, oh, I got a fraction, I don't know what to do. You've done fractions through elementary school. We've done tons of fractions so far this year, so we just need to get b isolated. So to get rid of -3/5, we have to add 3/5. So we have -4 plus 3/5. Let me just move this over here to continue. All right, so we need a common denominator. Well, don't forget, that's a -4/1. So what's a common denominator for 1 and 5? Let's just times it by 5, times that by 5. All right, so now we have -20/5 plus 3/5. Well, 3 minus 20, or -20 plus 3 is -17/5. So right, don't know why I wrote 7 there. There we go. Okay, so there's b, -17/5. Got it, right? So the worst you have to do is a little common denominator work in these questions. They don't get much harder than that. Pretty easy, right? All right, so let's write our equation out. Y equals mx plus b. Let's sub in what we know now. Y equals m is -3/5 x, and the y-intercept is -17/5. So that's a pretty nasty decimal again. If we tried to graph that, that's a pretty gross decimal. What is 17 divided by 5? 17 divided by 5 is 3.4, right? So this would be 0 over negative 3.4 down. So it's a lot more accurate and easier just to write the fraction for now. Leave it like that. All right, we have 2 more quick ones, and they're important ones that trick everybody, so let's just wrap this up. Okay, example 5, determine the equation of a line with a slope of 0 and passing through this point. Now, you can do this question in about 3 seconds if you know what you're doing, or you can do it the long way. In the end, you get the same answer. So let's pretend I didn't notice anything was odd, although you should be at this point with all the math we've done this year noticing, remember, there's something special about a slope of 0. Okay, but let's just say we forgot about that. We don't even remember. Let's just go through the motions again. So what do? Y equals mx plus b. All right, well, we know m is 0. They told us that, but we don't know what b is. All right, so m is 0. Let me just write that down here. There we go. All right, so let's sub in the slope. So y equals 0, which is, we're going to replace m with, times x plus b. Well, what's 0 times x? 0 times x is just 0. So it's y equals 0 plus b, y equals b. All right, so now we're going to have to solve for b. So they gave me a point here to sub in. X is 6, y is 4. So let's sub that in. Now everyone panics and they're like, I don't know what to do. Well, let's figure this out here. 6, 4. So we want to replace the x coordinate with 6. Well, look over here. There's no x coordinate. Okay. Well, we want to replace the y coordinate with 4. We do have a y. So let's sub it in. And what do we get? Oops, sorry. So I'm going to replace y with 4. And there's b. Ta-da. B is 4. So now when I write this equation out, here's what it's going to look like. Y equals 0x, because we're going to replace m with 0, plus b, which is 4. So 0 times x is 0, so it's just y equals 4. Now, that's a special type of line. Remember when there's only an x, and we've done lessons on this a lot now, so go back, review everything. If there's only, sorry, not only an x, but only a y in the equation, right? No x. This is a horizontal line. So that's the first clue that something's up. Or maybe the last clue, I don't know. The first clue actually should have been this right here. Slope of 0. Anytime you have a slope of 0, right, that means the steepness. Remember, slope is steepness. The steepness is 0, right? So steepness is 0. This is flat ground. A horizontal line has flat ground. Okay, so this is just a horizontal line. So remember how we graph that? Like, what if we made a table of values? I'm just kind of jumping all over the place, all the stuff we've talked about. Remember, you can make x anything you want. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 100, a million, negative 1,000, whatever you want. What's y going to be? Y is always 4, 4, 4, 4. That's why there's no x in this equation. It doesn't matter what x is. So how do we graph this? Well, in our previous lessons, we've talked about this during week 1 and our previous units before March break. So how do we graph it? All we do is we draw a horizontal line through 0, 4. All right, so here's my y-axis, right? Here's my x-axis. We'll say this is, 1, 2, 3, 4 up. All right, so if I wanted to graph this, all I would do is just use my ruler, draw. Sorry, I know I should use my ruler, but I'm in a rush here. There it is, y equals 4. It's a horizontal line, right? Passes through 0, 4. Now, you could skip all the work for this question. You could skip everything and just jump to the final answer. The final answer is y equals 4. How do I know that? Well, and again, if you go back to our week 1 lessons, okay, 1, 2, and 3, we talk about this a bunch. If you go back to everything we did before March break, we talked about this a bunch. Anytime the slope is 0, which is what they give us, it's a horizontal line every single time. Okay, and all we do, and to do it the quickest, we just write y equals whatever the y coordinate is. And in this case, the y coordinate is 4. So if I make up another one, I'm just going to write one down here real quick. If someone says, okay, find the equation line that has a slope of 0 and passing through, let's go, it doesn't matter, negative 399. Okay, the equation would just be y equals 99. Done. It's a horizontal line way, way up here somewhere at 99. Okay, that's it. That's the whole thing. So you don't have to do all this work I did, but I was showing you through all this work over here how we could get to the same conclusion by following the same steps. But you can shortcut it if you know this fact, because we've talked about it to death. Okay, all right, final example here. All right, well, we just talked about the horizontal lines, so logic would lead us to believe we're probably going to talk about the vertical line next, which is usually what we do when we talk about lines over the last month. All right, so determine the equation of a line with an undefined slope and passing through this point here. Okay, well, the first thing, and at this point, the bell has to go off in your head. When you have a slope of 0 or an undefined slope, those are the two weirdos. Slope of 0 is horizontal. Undefined slope tells us it's a vertical line. Okay? Now, we can't use the usual rules. We can't do step 1, step 2, step 3 here. We can't do step 1. Substitute the slope into the equation. How do I substitute undefined into the equation? That's not going to work. Solve for b. It's a vertical line. So what if it's like over here? Well, when's it going to cross the y-axis? This is your y-axis over here, right? And b is somewhere over here. So it might not even have one. In fact, most of them don't. The only way a vertical line could have a y-intercept is if that vertical line lays right on top of the y-axis. And in that case, well, what would its y-intercept be? Every point on the line would be a y-intercept. So it has basically what we're coming to the conclusion of, and we've seen this in our notes before. Let me just get rid of all this junk. Is that a vertical line has these properties, right? So if it's vertical, okay, it has a slope, right, that's undefined, okay, and it has no y-intercept. So we can't use the usual rules for this. Now, if you go back, we've talked about this. How do we write the equation of a vertical line? We just write x equals, and usually we use this format. We use x equals a. All right. Now, what's a? A is supposed to be, think about our points. Remember how we always talk our points that this is b? Well, the x-coordinate is usually a, okay? And we use a and b when we're talking about the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So in this case, my x-intercept. So let's think of where this point is. Negative 5, 8. So negative 5 over, let's say this is negative 5 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's negative 5 over 8 up. We'll just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I know it's a junky graph, but it'll do. All right, negative 5, 8. So there is my x and y coordinates, right? All right, so there's that point. Well, if we have an undefined slope, that has to, at this point, got to tell us we're drawing a vertical line. So we draw a vertical line through it. Look where it's going to cross the x-axis at. It has an x-intercept, and we've seen this in our lessons already, of negative 5 over 0 up. So no matter where you go on this graph, and we can make a table too. What if we make a graph, right? No matter what you do, you can make y anything you want. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, any number you want. In this case, x coordinates are always going to be negative 5, no matter what. Right? So you can pick any point in this line. It doesn't matter. The x coordinate is going to be negative 5. So this one has a special equation, which is x equals a, which is just the x coordinate of the points you're given, the x coordinate of all the points on this line. So the equation is just going to be x equals negative 5. So anytime we have an equation that has just an x with no y, that's always a vertical line. And again, we've covered this in the previous lessons. Go back, watch the videos again, study your notes. Right? It's definitely something you have to have memorized and know for a fact. It's really important in grade 9 that you know how to find your equation lines, and you also know about the horizontal and vertical line, when slope is 0 and when slope's undefined. All right, so try the questions and then check out the next video.